Did you know that every time you remember something someone did to you, your brain releases the exact same stress hormones as if it were happening right now? You're literally poisoning yourself with memories from the past. But today you're going to discover why forgiveness isn't just a gift for the person who hurt you, but the most powerful neurological key to transform your mind, heal your body, and reclaim your personal power. And I'm going to prove it to you with science and the profound wisdom of Carl Jung. Imagine for a moment that you could release all that weight you carry in your chest, that rage you wake up feeling every morning, that bitterness that follows you like a shadow and that you've carried for years, thinking that somehow it's hurting the person who wounded you. But the brutal reality is this: that person is probably living their life peacefully while you remain prisoner to a story that already happened. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, said something that will change your perspective forever. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. And this isn't just pretty philosophy. Modern neuroscience has proven that when you forgive, you literally rewire your brain, create new neural connections, and release a cocktail of chemicals that heal your body from within. Have you ever wondered why you still feel that stab in your stomach when you see that person on social media? Why your heart races when someone mentions their name? Your nervous system is trapped in a loop from the past, reliving the trauma over and over again. But it doesn't have to be this way. Before you tell me you don't know what they did to me, let me be clear with you. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's not justifying. It's not being weak. Forgiveness is the most radical act of self-love you can do. It's telling your nervous system, I will no longer allow this person to control my present from the past. And if you're here, it's because a part of you is already ready to let go. A part of you already understood that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. So join me on this journey of deep transformation, because what we're going to explore today won't just change your relationship with forgiveness, it's going to revolutionize the way you experience life. Let's start by understanding something fundamental that most people don't comprehend. When someone hurts you deeply, your brain goes into survival mode. The limbic system, which is the primitive part of your mind, registers the experience as a real threat to your existence. And every time you remember that event, your brain's amygdala reacts as if it were happening again. This means your body releases cortisol, adrenaline, and a cascade of stress hormones that literally inflame your system, suppress your immune system, and keep your mind in a state of constant hypervigilance. It's like having a fire alarm going off in your head 24 hours a day. Jung understood this long before neuroimaging existed. He knew that what we don't process consciously becomes what he called repressed unconscious content. And this repressed content doesn't disappear. It stays there, in the depths of your psyche, controlling your reactions, your decisions, and your quality of life from the shadows. Have you ever found yourself reacting disproportionately to something small? That reaction isn't really about what's happening now. It's about all that unprocessed emotional charge that's looking for a way out. It's your psyche screaming that it needs healing. Think about Maria, a 35-year-old woman who couldn't maintain a stable relationship because every time her partner was late or didn't respond to a message immediately, she exploded in fits of jealousy and paranoia. For years, she thought the problem was the men she chose, until she discovered that the real root was her father's emotional abandonment when she was 8 years old. That unprocessed pain was sabotaging every new relationship. Jung would say that Maria was projecting her unhealed wound onto all her present relationships. And neuroscience shows us that her brain, specifically her hippocampus that processes memories, was associating any sign of possible abandonment with the original trauma, triggering the same panic response she felt as a child. Here's your first practical exercise. Close your eyes for a moment and bring your attention to that situation or person that generates the most resentment in you. Notice where you feel the tension in your body. Is it in your chest, in your stomach, in your shoulders? Just observe without judging. This physical tension is the manifestation of that trapped emotional energy. Now breathe deeply and repeat this phrase. I recognize that this pain lives in my body and I am ready to release it, not for the other person, but for my inner peace. You don't have to believe it completely yet. Just say it and allow the words to plant a seed in your unconscious. If you want to transform your life from the root, give this video a like, and let's move to the next point that will reveal something probably no one has told you about forgiving yourself. Now we're going to explore the most dangerous and yet most liberating territory of your psyche. Jung called it the shadow. And it's that part of you that contains everything you've rejected, denied, or judged as unacceptable about yourself. And here's the revelation that will impact your life. You cannot truly forgive others until you learn to forgive yourself. The shadow isn't just your negative aspects. It also includes your unexpressed potentials, your talents buried under layers of "I'm not enough," and those parts of you that you rejected to be accepted by your family or society. When you don't have a conscious relationship with your shadow, you end up projecting it onto others. Has it ever happened to you that the person who bothers you most has exactly the characteristics you hate most about yourself? That's not a coincidence. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." The person who hurt you probably activated something in your shadow that you don't want to see. But here's the transformative power. When you start forgiving yourself for your own failures, mistakes, and aspects you've rejected, something magical happens in your brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is the most evolved part of your mind, begins to take control over the primitive limbic system. You literally develop more neurological compassion. Imagine Carlos, a successful executive who held a deep grudge against his brother because he had publicly humiliated him at a family gathering 5 years ago. What Carlos didn't want to recognize is that he himself had humiliated others in work meetings many times. His rage toward his brother was actually rage toward that part of him that could also be cruel and insensitive. When Carlos could finally see himself in his brother's mirror, when he could say, "Yes, I also have that capacity to hurt," something broke inside him. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was one of the most painful moments of his life. But it was also the moment where his true liberation began. Neuroscience shows us that self-compassion activates the same neural networks as compassion toward others. When you practice forgiveness toward yourself, you're literally training your brain to be more compassionate in general. It's like strengthening an emotional muscle. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, requires you to integrate your shadow. Not eliminate it or repress it, but consciously embrace it. And this includes forgiving yourself for all the times you acted from your shadow without realizing it. Do you remember that time you hurt someone with your words when you were in pain? That occasion where you betrayed your own integrity out of fear? Those moments where you were exactly what you promised never to be? Your shadow is full of these memories that you've probably buried under layers of justifications. But here's what I want you to understand. Those moments don't define you, they inform you. They are teachers disguised as mistakes. And when you can look at them with compassion instead of judgment, when you can say, "I did that from my pain, but I am not just that," you open a sacred space for transformation. Here's your second exercise. I want you to think of a situation where you acted in a way you're not proud of. Something where you hurt someone or betrayed yourself. Instead of diving into guilt, I want you to ask yourself, what wound in me was crying for attention in that moment? Almost always you'll discover that behind your worst moments, there's a part of you that was suffering and didn't know how to express it in a healthy way. That part needs your compassion, not your condemnation. Repeat this phrase: I forgive myself for acting from my pain. I recognize my humanity and choose to learn from this experience. And this brings us to a revolutionary truth that Jung expressed perfectly. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Your capacity to forgive doesn't just transform you. It transforms the energy of the entire situation. Let's now talk about something that will revolutionize your understanding of forgiveness. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming who you really are, separate from the expectations and projections of others. And it turns out that forgiveness is one of the most powerful tools for this process of self-discovery. When you carry resentment, part of your identity is defined by what was done to you. You become the person who was betrayed, the one who was abandoned, the one who was humiliated. Your personal story becomes intertwined with your pain in a way that keeps you trapped in a limited version of yourself. Jung understood that many people build their entire personality around their wounds. They become addicted to their victim role not because they enjoy suffering, but because they don't know who they would be without that pain. It's as if the wound had become so much a part of their identity that letting go of resentment feels like losing themselves. But here's what neuroscience reveals to us. Your brain has what's called neuroplasticity, the ability to form new neural connections until the day you die. This means you can literally rewire your identity. You can go from being the person who was hurt to being the person who healed and transformed. Consider Anna's story, a woman who for 15 years defined herself by the abuse she suffered in her marriage. Every conversation, every new relationship, every important decision was filtered through that wound. Her identity was so intertwined with her trauma that when she finally found the strength to heal, she had an existential crisis. She didn't know who she was without her pain. This is what Jung would call a symbolic death. For your true self to be born, the version of you that's tied to the past has to die. And this can be terrifying because it means facing the uncertainty of not knowing who you'll be on the other side of forgiveness. But it's precisely in this uncertainty where your greatest potential lies. When you release the narrative of your pain, you open space to discover aspects of yourself that have been dormant. Talents you didn't develop because you were too busy protecting your wound. Dreams you didn't pursue because your energy was invested in keeping resentment alive. Neuroscience shows us that when you forgive, your medial prefrontal cortex, which is associated with sense of self, literally reorganizes. New neural connections form, and your brain begins to construct a different narrative about who you are and what's possible for your life. Jung said that there is no birth of consciousness without pain, and the process of individuation through forgiveness is exactly that, an emotional birth where you give birth to a more authentic and free version of yourself. Have you noticed that people who have gone through deep forgiveness processes have a different presence? There's something in their eyes, in their way of speaking, in how they occupy space that transmits a depth and peace that can't be faked. It's because they've gone through this symbolic death and rebirth. Here's your third exercise, and this one is powerful. I want you to imagine what your life would be like if you were no longer defined by what happened to you. If that painful story was just an experience you had, not the totality of who you are. What would you do differently? How would you relate to yourself? What dreams would you pursue? Write this in your mind. I am bigger than my story. My past informed me, but doesn't define me. I am ready to discover who I am when my identity isn't tied to my pain. Even if there's resistance, even if part of you feels scared to let go, acknowledge that resistance and continue with the process. And this brings us to one of the most profound revelations about forgiveness that most people completely misunderstand. Now we're going to destroy the most dangerous myth about forgiveness, one that keeps millions of people trapped in cycles of resentment and bitterness. You've been told that forgiving is being weak, that it means letting people get away with it, that it's a way of minimizing your pain or justifying the unjustifiable. All of that is a lie. Forgiveness is the most radical act of personal power that exists. Jung understood it when he said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." Forgiving isn't about the other person. It's about reclaiming your emotional sovereignty. It's saying, "You don't have power over my internal state, I decide how I feel." Think about this. While you maintain resentment, you're giving that person immeasurable control over your life. Every time their memory triggers your rage, every time their image in your mind ruins your day, every time their presence, even if only mental, disturbs your peace, you're handing them your power on a silver platter. Neuroscience shows us something fascinating. When you forgive, activity in your anterior insula, which processes negative emotions, decreases significantly. At the same time, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, associated with emotional regulation and conscious decision-making, activates. You're literally taking control of your own neurological state. Imagine Roberto, a successful businessman who had spent 10 years sabotaging his own success, because in his mind, he was eternally competing with a partner who had cheated him. Every business decision, every opportunity, every professional relationship was filtered through that wound. He didn't realize it, but he was allowing a past event to control his present and future. When Roberto finally understood that his success had nothing to do with beating that person, when he could let go of the need for revenge and focus on building from his own vision, his business was completely transformed. Not because he forgave to be a good person, but because he reclaimed his mental and emotional energy. Jung spoke of what he called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to transform conflict into growth. When you forgive, you're not minimizing what happened. You're transforming that experience from a wound that limits you into wisdom that empowers you. And here's what I want you to understand about true forgiveness. It doesn't require the other person to change, apologize, or even acknowledge what they did. Your forgiveness is independent of their behavior. It's a unilateral decision you make for your own freedom. This doesn't mean you're going to allow them to continue hurting you. Forgiving isn't being naive, nor does it mean you have to keep that person in your life. You can forgive and maintain healthy boundaries. You can forgive and choose to have no contact. You can forgive and still seek legal justice if necessary. Forgiveness is in your heart. Boundaries are in your behavior. They are two completely different processes, and both are necessary for a healthy life. The real question isn't, does that person deserve my forgiveness? The question is, do I deserve to live free from the poison of resentment? And the answer is always yes. Here's your fourth exercise, and this one will require courage. I want you to identify a situation where you've been waiting for the other person to change or apologize so you can move forward. Now imagine that apology or change is never going to come. Are you going to allow that to control the rest of your life? Repeat this declaration of power. I don't need you to change for me to be free. I don't need your apology to heal my heart. I choose my peace over being right. I choose my power over my pain. And this brings us to the final and most transformative point of everything we've talked about today. We've reached the most powerful moment of this conversation, where science and Jung's wisdom meet to reveal the true miracle of forgiveness. Because what I'm going to share with you now isn't just theory. It's the biological reality of what happens in your brain when you make the radical decision to forgive. Neuroscientists have discovered that forgiveness activates what's called the neural reward circuit. When you genuinely forgive, your brain releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, the same cocktail of chemicals that's released when you experience deep love, significant achievements, or authentic connections. You're literally getting high on your own internal pharmacy. But there's more. Forgiveness also stimulates the vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your heart and digestive system. A healthy vagus nerve is associated with better emotional regulation, stronger immune system, and even greater longevity. When you forgive, you're not just healing your mind, you're literally healing your body. Jung understood this when he spoke of what he called the natural healing function of the psyche. Your mind has an innate tendency toward wholeness, toward integrity. Resentment is like an emotional infection that blocks this natural healing function. Forgiveness is the antibiotic that allows your psyche to return to its natural state of peace and expansion. Think about this. Every cell in your body regenerates approximately every 7 years. This means that physically, you're no longer the same person who was hurt a decade ago. But if you keep carrying resentment, you're forcing these new cells to carry a story that isn't theirs. You're transmitting trauma through time to versions of yourself that didn't live it. Consider the case of Maria Elena, a 60-year-old woman who carried 30 years of resentment toward her mother for the emotional abandonment of her childhood. For decades, she suffered from chronic digestive problems, insomnia, and anxiety that no doctor could fully explain. When she finally worked on forgiveness toward her mother, she not only changed her relationship with the past, but her physical symptoms began to gradually disappear. This isn't magic. It's neuroplasticity in action. Your brain literally reorganizes when you release toxic thought patterns. New synaptic connections form. Brain areas that had been in hypervigilance can finally relax. Your nervous system can return to its natural state of regulation. Jung said that what we do not confront within ourselves, we will meet in our destiny as fate. But the opposite is also true. What we heal within ourselves completely transforms the possibilities of our future. When you forgive, you don't just change your past, you change your destiny. Because you start making decisions from clarity and not from the wound. You start attracting relationships and opportunities that resonate with your new emotional vibration. The world literally responds differently to the version of you that's no longer carrying resentment. But the greatest gift of forgiveness isn't what you get, it's what you become. You become someone who has proven they're stronger than circumstances. Someone who chose peace over drama. Someone who transformed their greatest wound into their greatest wisdom. And here's the most beautiful part. When you heal deeply, you become a healer for others. Your very presence becomes medicine. People can feel that you've been through the fire and came out transformed. Your existence becomes living proof that healing is possible. Here's your final exercise, and this one will mark a before and after in your life. I want you to close your eyes and visualize the version of you that has already let everything go. That version that walks lightly, that smiles genuinely, that looks toward the future with hope instead of toward the past with resentment. That version of you already exists in your potential. It already lives in your emotional DNA waiting to be activated. Forgiveness is the key that releases it. Repeat with me. I choose to become the version of me that has already healed. I release the past to embrace my future. My forgiveness is my power. If you've made it this far, it's because your soul is ready for this transformation. You've resisted the urge to close the video when it got uncomfortable. You've stayed present when every cell of your being wanted to flee from the pain. That's courage. That's the stuff transformers are made of. But this isn't the end of the journey. It's just the beginning. Because understanding forgiveness intellectually is only the first step. Living it, embodying it, making it your new way of being in the world that requires practice, patience, and a good dose of self-compassion. The world needs more people who have done this work. It needs more people who have transformed their pain into wisdom, their resentment into compassion, their victimization into empowerment. It needs more people like the one you're choosing to become. So I leave you with this final challenge. For the next 7 days, every time you feel the familiar sting of resentment, instead of feeding it with your thoughts, you're going to breathe deeply and ask yourself, how can I use this energy to create something beautiful in my life? Instead of sending mental energy toward what hurt you, you're going to send it toward what you want to build. Instead of investing your emotional power in the past, you're going to invest it in your future. And if this message touched something deep in your heart, if you recognized your own story in these words, if you feel you're ready for this level of transformation, write in the comments, I choose my freedom. I want to see how many people are ready to let go of what has kept them prisoner and embrace the extraordinary life that's waiting for them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because we have more transformational content that will accelerate your healing and personal growth process. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, because when we share healing tools, we multiply their power. Your future self is thanking you for the brave decision you're making today. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it's the most direct path to freedom. And your emotional freedom is the greatest gift you can give to the world. See you in the next video, where we're going to explore how to build healthy boundaries that protect your new inner peace. Because once you heal, you need tools to maintain that healing. Until then, keep choosing your power over your pain. Keep choosing your future over your past. Your transformed life begins now.